Welcome back to Scripture Horror. I'm your host, and tonight we're diving into 6 of the most disturbing true stories of lost campers in Alaska. Before we begin, there's something you need to hear. A pizza delivery driver went hiking alone in the Alaskan backcountry. Days later, they found him, but when the rescue team returned to verify his story, the place he described didn't exist. The clearing filled with abandoned tents, the scattered camping gear from missing people, all gone like it was never real. And he's not the only one. A bank employee went on a fishing trip with 4 co-workers and came back alone. The strangest part? There's no record any of those co-workers ever existed, yet she has photos of all 5 of them standing together. What chills me the most is this. Both survivors reported hearing the same thing, voices in the woods. Voices of people they knew calling their names, even though those people were thousands of miles away. If you want more unsettling true stories, hit that subscribe button now, because what you're about to hear will make you rethink every camping trip. So what's really happening out there in Alaska's wilderness? Why do so many people vanish? And why does all the evidence disappear with them? Let's find out. My name is Marcus Chen, and I've been delivering pizzas in Portland for years, long enough for it to feel like a lifetime. When you're in your 20s and watching everyone else move forward with careers, relationships, and plans, while you spend your nights handing strangers boxes of pepperoni or sausage, the years blur together into something heavy. I graduated with a communications degree, but the job market collapsed at the exact moment I needed it not to. Delivery money paid my rent, and somehow, temporary, turned into permanent without me noticing. I kept telling myself I'd figure things out eventually, but I never did. That's why Alaska became my escape plan. Adventure content was trending. Hiking influencers were blowing up online, and I kept thinking, if some guy with a GoPro could build a following by walking through the woods, why couldn't I? I had nothing to lose, no career, no commitments, just a studio apartment with peeling paint and a landlord who pretended not to hear the leaking pipes. So I spent months saving every tip I made, planning out a hike along a section of the historic Iditarod Trail. Not the dog sledding route, obviously, but the connected backpacking trail network. It looked perfect, remote, rugged, photogenic. If I documented something real, something intense, maybe I could break out of the delivery driver trap. I bought decent gear with my tax refund, a good tent, a warm sleeping bag, a power bank, a GPS watch, all the things the hiking blogs said I needed. I even splurged on a satellite communicator for emergencies since cell service would be non-existent. The night before I left Portland, I posted a teaser, Pizza Guy Goes to Alaska. It got more attention than anything I'd ever uploaded. For the first time in years, it felt like I was doing something that mattered. I flew into Anchorage on a Sunday in late August. Blue skies, perfect temperature, mountains so clear they looked fake. I took a bus to Willow, where most hikers started the section I wanted to do. The trail markers looked exactly like the guidebook photos, weathered wooden posts and clean metal signs every few miles. Everything felt right. Monday morning, I hit the trail at sunrise. Thick spruce forests swallowed the path, then opened into wide meadows that shimmered under the early light. I crossed small streams every few miles. I made good time, stopping every hour to post a picture or short video. The engagement was insane. Comments, shares, messages from people saying they loved following along. I hiked 10 miles that first day and camped at a designated rest area with bear-proof storage and a fire ring. That night, I lay in my sleeping bag feeling proud of myself for the first time in forever. Tuesday was even better. The weather held, the trail stayed clear, and I hiked 12 miles without difficulty. My GPS watch tracked everything perfectly, and outdoor accounts with big followings were resharing my posts. I started thinking maybe this was it, my break, my way out of the never-ending pizza shift life. Wednesday morning is when everything went wrong. Around 6 miles into the day's hike, I reached a junction. A side trail branched off from the main route. It wasn't on my official Iditarod trail map, but it was clearly a legitimate trail, well-worn, wide, with recent footprints pressed deep into the dirt. I even saw a few fresh energy bar wrappers. My GPS showed it heading northeast, which would cut several miles off my route if it reconnected ahead. The incline looked easier, too. A shortcut. A smoother path. A chance to get better content. I took it. For the first hour, everything was perfect. The trail was wide and clean, with no fallen trees, no mud, no overgrowth. It honestly looked better maintained than the main route. I congratulated myself for discovering what I thought was a local secret. But after 2 hours, I started checking my GPS more often. The trail kept heading northeast, but I should have reconnected with the main route already. Instead, the map showed I was nowhere near any marked trail system. According to the GPS, I was hiking through empty wilderness where nothing existed. I stopped, took out my compass, checked my paper map. Everything told the same story. I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. I decided to turn back. But 2 hours later, I still hadn't found the junction. I kept walking, retracing what I thought were my own footsteps, but the trail looked wrong. Narrower in some places, wider in others, like it was changing behind me. But trees all looked the same. Every clearing was a copy of the last. Late afternoon hit, and panic crawled up my spine. I'd been hiking for hours and had no idea where I was. The satellite communicator couldn't get a signal under the dense canopy. My phone was useless. The GPS was no help off the mapped area. I set up camp early, telling myself that in the morning I'd find the junction if I stayed calm. But that night, around midnight, I heard voices calling from deeper in the woods. "Marcus, this way." I bolted upright in my sleeping bag, heart slamming against my ribs. The voice sounded like Jake, my friend back in Portland, but Jake was nowhere near Alaska. "Marcus, we found the way out." This time it was my sister Emma's voice, almost. It sounded wrong, like someone had recorded her and played it back at a slightly incorrect speed. The voices kept calling for nearly an hour, shifting directions, always just far enough that I couldn't see anything. I stayed in my tent, gripping my knife, telling myself I was dehydrated or stressed. When I woke Thursday morning, something was wrong with my gear. All my food, every bar, every pouch was organized by color. Nuts were sorted by type. My instant meals were stacked by the color of their packaging. My clothes were folded into perfect squares. The items in my backpack were arranged neatly, down to the smallest accessory. I am not a neat person. I stuff gear randomly into my bag. I had not done this. Someone had been in my campsite, inside my tent, inside my pack, while I slept. I packed up fast and started hiking again, trying to follow what I hoped was the way back. But everything looked identical. The trail split and rejoined itself unpredictably, creating new branches that hadn't existed the day before. By Thursday afternoon, I knew I was walking in circles. I found my own boot prints from earlier in the day. Not similar? Mine, the exact treads from my specific boots. The forest wasn't just confusing, it was keeping me trapped. The voices started again that night, but louder, more frequent. They didn't wait for darkness anymore. Multiple voices at once, calling from all directions, all sounding like people I knew but just slightly wrong. Friday morning, I found my Wednesday campsite again, not a similar clearing, my exact campsite. The tent stake holes were still in the ground. The ashes from my fire were still warm. I had walked for hours in a straight line and ended up exactly where I'd started. That's when I knew the forest wasn't natural. By Friday afternoon, the voices were constant, threading through the trees, slipping between branches like they were being carried by something that didn't need to breathe. They whispered encouragement, warnings, familiar phrases, all in voices I recognized but twisted. And I stopped ignoring them. Instead, I followed. If I played along, maybe I could understand what was happening. The voices led me off the trail entirely, through thick underbrush, around massive fallen trees. I pushed through dense vines and brambles for hours. Then, unexpectedly, the forest opened into a wide clearing. I froze. There were campsites everywhere, dozens of them. Tents slumped under the weight of old rain. Backpacks scattered, their zippers rusted. Sleeping bags mildewed and shredded. Everything looked abandoned long enough to rot, but recent enough to still be recognizable. I checked the gear for ID tags. I found driver's licenses, credit cards, hiking permits. Different people, different states. All recent. 3 years. 2 years. 8 months. Hikers who took the same shortcut. Hikers who never made it back. I realized the voices belonged to them, or whatever was left of them. Saturday morning, I heard my own voice calling from the trees. My exact voice. "Marcus, this way." We found the way out. I wasn't speaking, but something out there was. That day, I stopped trying to find a trail. I stopped trying to run. I used the abandoned gear to build a huge signal fire. I tore apart tents and sleeping bags, threw them onto the flames, watched thick black smoke rise above the forest. Sunday morning, a rescue helicopter spotted the smoke. They airlifted me out. The pilot told me I'd been reported missing when I failed to reach a planned checkpoint. They'd been searching for days. When they sent a search team to the coordinates where they found me, there was nothing. No clearing. No abandoned tents. No evidence that anyone had ever been there. Just untouched forest. When I got back to Portland, I quit my pizza delivery job. I couldn't stand being alone in a car anymore. I needed noise, people, movement. I took a job at a busy coffee shop where the windows are big and the crowds never stop. I never posted what actually happened. I told everyone I got dehydrated and disoriented. I deleted all the Alaska content. But late at night, sometimes I still hear voices calling my name, ones that sound like people I know, but slightly wrong, like recordings warped by something not human. And I know there's a trail somewhere in Alaska that looks like a shortcut but isn't. A trail that leads people somewhere they can't return from. A place the forest doesn't want anyone to talk about. If you ever hike up there, or anywhere, don't take shortcuts that aren't on the map. Don't follow voices calling your name from the dark. And if a trail looks too good to be true, turn around. Some detours don't lead back. They lead to a place that never lets you leave. And sometimes, when the world gets quiet, I swear the forest is still calling me. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I've been working as a bank teller at Desert Sun Credit Union in Phoenix for 6 months now. I know that doesn't sound like a long time, but banking is one of those jobs where you learn fast or you don't last at all. In half a year, I dealt with everything from furious customers screaming about overdraft fees to mandatory armed robbery training drills that left my nerves shot for days. I thought I was getting good at staying calm under pressure. But nothing at the bank, nothing in my entire life, prepared me for what happened during our company fishing trip to Alaska last September. The memory still feels like a splinter lodged deep in my mind, something I can't pull out no matter how much I try. I was still the new girl at the bank, 23 years old, fresh out of college, trying to make a good impression on coworkers who had known each other for years. So when Dave Martinez, our branch manager, announced the annual staff fishing trip during a monthly meeting, I jumped at the chance before anyone else even reacted. 5 of us were splitting the cost of a remote cabin rental: me, Dave, Linda from customer service, Janet from accounting, and Tom, who handled business loans. Everyone talked about how amazing last year's trip had been. Big salmon, peaceful water, scenery so beautiful it didn't look real. I'd never been fishing a day in my life, but I wanted to fit in, to feel like I was part of this little bank family. The plan seemed simple enough. We'd fly to Anchorage, rent a big SUV, then drive several hours north to a secluded lake Dave had booked months earlier. The listing promised total privacy, no neighbors, no nearby cabins, nothing but trees and water for miles. I bought all new gear, waterproof boots, a tackle box, even one of those vests with too many pockets that I had no idea how to use. I wanted to look like I belonged there, even if I had to fake it. We landed in Anchorage on a cool Thursday evening at the end of September. The rental place handed us the keys to a massive SUV, and Dave punched the coordinates of the cabin into the GPS. The drive north was surreal. Mountains rising like giants on both sides of us. Endless forests swaying under the pale sky. Barely another car in sight. As we got deeper into the wilderness, our cell service faded to nothing. Dave said that was part of the charm. No work calls, no emails, just us, nature, and a weekend away from the fluorescent lighting of the bank. Lake seclusion lived up to its name immediately. The cabin sat on a small hill overlooking a perfectly still lake, a wooden dock stretching out into the water. The lake was so clear you could see fish swimming 10 feet down without even squinting. Janet said it looked like something off a postcard. Tom, always impatient, started setting up his fishing rod before we'd even unloaded the groceries. Dave promised we'd catch more salmon than we could possibly eat. He'd been there before and knew every good spot. The first day was perfect. We hiked to a shallow bay where the salmon were running so thick you could almost imagine stepping from fish to fish across the water. Tom caught 6 within the first hour. Linda shrieked every time she hooked one, laughing so hard she nearly dropped her rod more than once. Even Janet, our quiet worrier, relaxed enough to smile and joke around. I managed to land 3 salmon myself, my first fish ever, and Dave congratulated me like I'd just won a tournament. That evening, we grilled our catch on the back deck while the sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the sky in orange and pink. We drank wine, swapped stories about nightmare customers, and laughed until my cheeks hurt. For a moment, I believed this trip would be exactly what I hoped: fun, bonding, and memories we'd talk about for years. The second day started just as peacefully. Tom left at dawn to try a spot he'd scouted farther down the shoreline, half a mile or so from the cabin. The rest of us took our time at breakfast before heading out to meet him around noon. But when we got there, Tom was gone. His fishing rod and tackle box sat right where he'd left them, set up perfectly beside the water. His coffee thermos was still warm. But the lake was calm, and the water at that spot was only knee-deep. There was no sign of footprints leading away, no splash marks, nothing. We searched for hours, calling his name until our voices went raw. Linda wanted to use her phone, but of course, none of us had service. The nearest town was 50 miles back down the road. Dave said we should wait until evening. Maybe Tom had just wandered off and gotten turned around. But when the sun disappeared and he still hadn't returned, the panic truly set in. Janet volunteered to hike out the next morning to get help. She'd run cross-country in college, knew how to read maps, and seemed confident about the route. Dave, Linda, and I would stay behind in case Tom came back. Janet left after breakfast on Friday with water, energy bars, and the cabin's detailed trail map tucked into her backpack. She promised she'd be back with help by evening. But Friday evening slipped into night, and then into midnight, and Janet never returned. Dave sat staring into the fire, muttering that the hike should have taken her 3 hours at most. Linda curled into a ball on the couch, shaking, whispering that whatever took Tom had taken Janet too. Saturday morning made everything worse. On the front porch, folded neatly as if someone had done laundry and laid them out to dry, were Janet's clothes. Everything she'd been wearing, jeans, flannel shirt, underwear, socks. Clean, untorn. Arranged with deliberate care. But Janet herself was nowhere. Dave kept insisting maybe she'd gotten overheated on the hike and stripped somehow, but that didn't explain the perfect folding or why she would leave them on the porch like a gift. Linda barricaded herself in the cabin after that, refusing to step outside even to use the bathroom. Dave and I searched the woods for hours, following the same trail Janet had taken. No footprints, no broken branches, no dropped items, just the suffocating quiet of the forest pressing in on us. By evening, the fear was thick enough to taste. Then, just after dark, we heard Tom's voice. Clear as day. Sarah. Dave, help me. I'm hurt. It came from the tree line behind the cabin. Linda heard it from inside and began sobbing. Dave grabbed a flashlight and dragged me outside, but when we swept the beam across the forest, no one was there. The voice didn't call again. Something about it chilled me. It sounded like Tom, but slightly wrong, as if someone had practiced his voice and almost nailed it. On Sunday morning, Linda was gone. Her bed was messy, like she'd climbed out minutes earlier. Her glasses sat on the dock's railing, still warm when I picked them up. But she was nowhere. Dave was unraveling fast. He kept pacing, whispering that something in the woods was hunting us, pulling us away one by one. I couldn't deny it. In 3 days, we'd gone from 5 people to 2 with nothing resembling a rational explanation. Dave said we had to leave. Now. We packed what remained of our things and started down the trail Janet had taken. I kept glancing over my shoulder. Convinced eyes were watching from the trees. A mile in, we found the trail blocked by massive pine logs stacked like barricades. But they hadn't fallen naturally. The cuts were clean, made by a saw. Dave climbed up to see if we could get around, but the second he touched the top log, he vanished. Not slipped, not fell. Vanished. One moment he was there, the next he was simply gone. His backpack dropped to the ground at my feet like it had been emptied of its owner. I don't remember running back to the cabin. My body moved on instinct, pure terror driving every step. When I got inside, gasping for air, I realized everything was wrong. All the others' belongings were gone. Dave's fishing gear, Linda's wine bottles, Janet's books, Tom's camera equipment, gone as if they'd never existed. The cabin looked like I'd been the only person staying there. On the counter, the guest book lay open to our check-in page. Only my signature was written down. No Dave Martinez, no Linda Chen, no Janet Rodriguez, no Tom Williams. I checked my phone next. Most of my photos were missing. Entire sections of my camera roll wiped clean, but 3 pictures remained, taken on the first day. All of us standing on the dock, holding our fish, smiling at the camera. Proof they'd been real. Proof I hadn't imagined them. But why only those 3 photos? Why those moments? I built a signal fire on the dock and kept it burning for 2 days. I didn't sleep, didn't eat. I just kept adding wood and watching the sky, praying someone would see the smoke. On the second afternoon, a fish and game plane landed on the lake. The pilot, a man named Rick, said he'd gotten a distress call about a lone female camper. Lone. That word hit me harder than anything. Back in Anchorage, the nightmare only deepened. The cabin was officially rented under my name alone. HR at the bank said I'd taken personal vacation days. No company fishing trip had ever been scheduled. No one named Dave, Linda, Janet, or Tom had signed up for anything. But the photos on my phone said otherwise. I left Phoenix after that. Quit my job. Moved back to Michigan. I work at a small hardware store now, in a town where everyone's lived there forever. It's quiet. Safe. Or so I tell myself. Last month I got a Christmas card in the mail. The return address said Janet Rodriguez, Phoenix P.O. Box. Inside was a photo of Janet standing in front of the cabin at Lake Seclusion. She was wearing the same flannel shirt I'd found folded on the porch. On the back, in neat handwriting, was a message. Thanks for the great fishing trip. Can't wait for next year. The post office confirmed the P.O. Box had been rented by a woman named Janet Rodriguez, but when I went there, the box was empty. Abandoned. I haven't gone fishing since. I never will. But every September, around the anniversary of the trip, I feel a pull. A deep, quiet urge to drive north. To find Lake Seclusion again. To see if my coworkers, real or not, are still waiting for me up there. The rational part of me says they never existed. The terrified part says they're still there. And I don't know which possibility scares me more. My name is Jordan Torres, and for the past 4 years I've been grinding through one dead-end job after another in Miami. Coffee shop barista, retail worker, food delivery driver. Every time I thought things couldn't get more depressing, they somehow did. While everyone from my high school group was in college or getting real careers, I was still asking strangers if they wanted whipped cream on their latte. By 20-something, my rent kept rising, my tips kept shrinking, and my self-respect was hanging by a thread. I needed a way out. Any way out. Even if it came wrapped in desperation. That's when the 30 Days Wild challenge took over the entire internet. If you missed the craze, good for you. It was this viral survival challenge where regular people were sent alone into the wilderness for a full month. Completely off the grid. No civilization. No safety net. The prize, $100,000 cash and instant social media fame from Wildstream, the app running the whole thing. Past winners were securing book deals, sponsorships, brand partnerships, everything someone stuck in minimum wage hell like me would kill for. It felt like the kind of opportunity that either changed your life or ruined it. But either way, it was better than staying stuck exactly where I was. The application process was laughably simple. Record a quick video explaining why you wanted in, pass a basic fitness test, and sign a stack of legal forms thick enough to stop a bullet. Wildstream would provide gear and fly participants to remote Alaskan locations. Viewers could interact with you through live chat, sending messages, voting on challenges, even paying for survival tips that would pop up on your phone screen. It was like a hybrid of reality TV, influencer culture, and survival entertainment, except the official line was that nobody had ever died. Supposedly. I hit record, told them the truth. I was broke and desperate, and somehow Wildstream accepted me. I quit my job on the spot. My manager, a middle-aged misery machine who loved reminding us we were replaceable, barely looked up when I told him I was leaving. My apartment was a roach-infested studio eating half my income. Dating, forget it. Who wants a broke guy with no car and 3 roommates? So I took the risk, boarded the flight wildstream booked, and hoped maybe, for once, life was giving me something better. The flight to Alaska was the nicest thing I'd experienced in years. First class, real food, actual legroom. I felt like a fraud sitting there, but also like maybe this challenge really would change everything. At the airport, a wildstream production assistant named Casey greeted me, handing me my packed gear and repeating the rules in a cheerful, rehearsed voice. The essentials: tent, sleeping bag, water purification tablets, fishing line, hatchet, and most importantly, the phone. Solar-powered, waterproof, unhackable, wildstream locked. It would stream 24/7, track my location, and let viewers interact with me. It was both my lifeline and my leash. When the helicopter dropped me at my assigned location, I almost forgot why I was there. The forest was breathtaking, towering pines, a lake sparkling like glass, air so clean it felt unreal compared to Miami's humidity and exhaust fumes. When the helicopter lifted off, leaving me in total silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: excitement. Setting up camp went surprisingly smooth. The tent cooperated, the water tablets worked, and I even managed a fire using techniques I'd only practiced through YouTube. By sunset, I was settled, and my viewer count was already rising. The chat feature hooked me instantly. Before the challenge, I had maybe 100 followers across every platform combined. But by the end of the first week, thousands were tuning in daily. Viewers left messages nonstop, some offering advice, some cheering me on, some just cracking jokes. For the first time ever, strangers actually cared about what I was doing. But week 2 changed everything. The messages shifted from playful to unnervingly specific. Check behind the big pine, something moved. Did you arrange those rocks? Why is there someone in your shelter at night? At first, I laughed it off as viewers trying to stir drama. But when I checked behind that pine tree, I found a perfect circle of stones, same size, same shape, arranged with eerie precision. I hadn't made it. I'd been streaming non-stop. When would I have done it? Then I noticed carved symbols on nearby trees. Not random markings, deliberate shapes, fresh cuts. Symbols I didn't recognize. I was miles from civilization, alone, and yet someone, or something, had been close enough to leave these behind without ever showing up on camera. The chat exploded with excitement. Finally, some real mystery. Jordan, investigate more. The attention felt good. Too good. And I convinced myself I must have overlooked the stones, that the symbols were older than they looked. The alternative was too unsettling to consider. But then the chat started describing conversations I was apparently having. Jordan, love how you're getting along with the other campers. Maya's so funny. Alex seems helpful, shared dinner with them again. Other campers? I'd been alone the entire time. When I asked the chat what they were talking about, the responses came fast. Dude, you've been talking to them for hours. The blonde girl is right next to your fire. How can you not see them? Confused and shaking, I reviewed the auto-saved footage. Watching myself sit by the fire, laughing, joking, nodding at empty air was worse than anything I'd imagined. I wasn't just talking. I was sharing food with no one, reacting naturally, comfortably, like I'd known these invisible friends forever. I contacted Wildstream emergency support. Their response was disturbingly casual. Isolation hallucinations were common, they claimed. A normal reaction to extended solitude. Completely safe, they said. Great for viewer engagement. That last part irritated me more than the explanation. By week 3, my stream was the most watched on the entire platform. Millions were watching. Donations skyrocketed. Fan art appeared of the other campers. Viewers named them Alex, the dark-haired guy, Maya, the blonde girl, Chris, quiet and calm. They gave them personalities, backstories, whole identities. And then, one evening, I saw them too. It was gradual, like adjusting to dim light. One moment I was alone. The next, Alex sat across from me, as real as the fire between us. Early 20s, dark hair, worn hiking gear. Fire looks good tonight, Jordan, he said, like we were old friends. I didn't run. I didn't question. Somehow, it felt normal. Within an hour, all three were there. Maya with her bright smile, Chris with his quiet presence. They gave me advice, joked with me, helped with camp tasks. The only wrong thing was their touch cold, like touching ice. They said they'd just adapted to the weather. That night, unable to sleep, I researched old incidents in the area. What I found hollowed me out. In the early 2000s, a small charter plane had crashed nearby. The pilot and one passenger died instantly. The three survivors, Alex Morrison, Maya Chen, and Chris Daniels, lived for several days but were never found. Their bodies were presumed lost somewhere in the wilderness. The descriptions matched my companions perfectly. I showed the article to the live stream, expecting panic. Instead, finally, "You figured it out. They've been so lonely. This is the best stream ever." They had known. They'd been watching the ghosts long before I ever saw them. To them, nothing strange was happening at all. I tried packing my things, but Alex and the others begged me to stay. They said I was the first person to see them in years. The chat begged me too. Donations poured in with messages. "Please don't leave them. You're their bridge. They need you." And deep down, I felt the same. Their loneliness was palpable, and for once in my life, I mattered to someone, even if they weren't alive. Week 4 brought the changes. I barely ate. Hunger vanished. My skin grew pale even under sunlight. My breath frosted the air. I slept long hours, yet felt drained. The chat loved it. "Jordan's adapting. He's becoming one of them." This is incredible. Alex, Maya, and Chris taught me strange things: how to stay warm without fire, how to conserve energy without food, how to exist in that strange boundary where they lived. On day 30, the rescue helicopter arrived, right on schedule, and everything inside me rejected it. The forest felt like home. The cold felt right. The living world felt distant, unnecessary. The idea of leaving them, leaving this, felt wrong. So I hid until the helicopter gave up. My stream still runs. Millions watch daily. The chat floods with messages. "Best stream ever. Never end this." Jordan finally found where he belongs. Sometimes I catch my reflection in the lake. My skin is almost translucent. My breath clouds the warm air. I don't feel hunger or thirst or loneliness anymore. Only a calm, perfect cold. Time slid strangely now. The analytics say my stream updated a few days ago, but it feels like moments and years at the same time. My family posts missing person updates, but they feel like they're about someone I used to be. This is where I belong. With them. In this quiet place between life and death, where an endless audience watches something impossible. Where 3 lost souls finally have someone to stay with them. And if you ever think about joining a challenge like this, remember, some bridges can't be uncrossed, some streams never end, and some audiences will never let you go home. My name is Chris Martinez, and for 3 years I worked as a line cook in Chicago. Romano's Kitchen was the kind of place where you either broke or toughened up fast. I started out scrubbing dishes right out of high school, working my way up until I finally earned a spot on the grill. The work wasn't glamorous: 12-hour shifts, burns on my arms, a kitchen so hot it felt like punishment, but I was good at it. I could handle the dinner rush when orders piled up and the head chef lost his temper. My coworkers respected me, and I'd even started dreaming that someday, maybe, I'd open a place of my own. But no matter how well things were going, a voice in the back of my mind kept whispering that I was soft, that I'd never done anything truly hard. My friends were off at college or traveling, posting pictures from Europe, from beaches, from mountains. And there I was, flipping burgers and making pasta in the same place every day. I liked cooking, I really did, but I felt like I needed something bigger. Something that would prove, at least to myself, that I wasn't afraid of a real challenge. That's how I ended up choosing Alaska. For 2 years, I saved money, researched trails, bought gear piece by piece. I settled on a solo week-long trek through the Chugach Mountains outside Anchorage. It wasn't considered the hardest trail in the state, but it was remote, rugged, and exactly the kind of test I wanted. I bought the right tent, cold weather gear, topo maps, and an emergency beacon. I studied those maps until I could practically recite the trail from memory. The plan was simple: follow the marked path for 7 days, camp in the designated spots, and fly home afterward. Easy. The first day went exactly how I'd imagined. Clear weather, well-marked trail, and an unbelievable feeling of freedom. After years in the cramped heat of a kitchen, the cold air felt like a different world. I reached my first campsite with energy to spare and slept better that night than I had in months. Everything fell apart on day 2. I woke to heavy gray clouds pushing in from the north. The forecast had promised clear skies all week, but Alaska doesn't negotiate with weather reports. By noon, snow was coming down so hard I couldn't see more than 10 feet ahead. The trail markers vanished under the fresh powder and my GPS started glitching. At first the location just jumped around a little, nothing serious. Electronics act weird in the cold. But then it flickered, flashed error messages I'd never seen, and by mid-afternoon, it was dead. The cold had drained the battery completely. I tried following what I thought was the trail, but with the snow blowing sideways in every direction looking identical, white trees, white ground, white sky, I lost it. My maps and compass were almost useless with thick gloves on, and I wasn't about to take them off in that freezing wind. Hours passed while I wandered, hoping I'd eventually stumble onto a landmark. My water bottle even started freezing inside my jacket. The cold pierced through my high-end gear like it was tissue paper. This wasn't the controlled chaos of a kitchen anymore. This was danger, real danger, and I was alone. That's when I saw the smoke. A thin vertical line rising from a valley about a mile below. In all that white, it looked almost unreal. A signal fire had to be. Maybe rangers, maybe other hikers, maybe someone with shelter and a working radio. I practically threw myself downhill, slipping on snow-covered rocks, grabbing at branches, stumbling more than walking. It took nearly 2 hours of hard, breath-stealing hiking to reach the valley floor. By the time I got there, my fingers were numb and my toes felt like they'd disappeared. The fire was enormous. Not a normal campfire, but a towering column of flame, 10 feet high, burning in a perfectly cleared circle with no trees within 20 yards. Visible for miles. Smart setup for a rescue signal. But as I approached, one thing hit me immediately. No one was there. The fire was blazing like fresh wood had just been added, but the clearing was empty. I shouted, "Hello? Anyone here?" No response, only the crackle of flames and the hollow echo of my own voice. That's when the weirdness began. The logs forming the fire were arranged with unnatural precision, spaced exactly the same distance from the center, aligned almost mathematically. The flames burned evenly in a perfect ring around the stack, something I'd never seen a natural fire do. Near the flames, I found camping gear. Expensive camping gear. Rows of high-end tents, sleeping bags lined up like displays, cooking equipment arranged in neat categories. It looked less like a campsite and more like a store's showroom. Everything sorted, everything clean, everything perfect. No wallets, no phones, no clothing scattered around, no signs of people actually living there. It felt staged. I called out again, louder this time. No answer. Whoever owned all this gear had stepped away, or so I told myself. Maybe they were gathering more wood. Maybe checking the area. Maybe I'd meet them soon enough. So I set up my tent along the edge of the clearing and waited. That night, the voices started. "Help! Over here!" A man's voice, urgent but steady, drifting from the north side of the clearing around 9 p.m. I grabbed my flashlight and headed toward it. "Where are you?" I shouted. "Over here, please help." But now it came from the south. I turned, walked that way. The voice called again from the east, then the west. Like it was circling me. I spent 2 miserable hours stumbling through the dark woods, chasing that voice. Every time I thought I was getting close, it drifted away again, always just out of reach. When I finally returned to the clearing, exhausted and freezing, something was wrong. My tent had been moved. Not far, maybe 3 feet to the left, but I knew exactly where I'd placed it, and this wasn't it. Inside, the strangeness multiplied. My sleeping bag was laid out perfectly flat. My clothes were folded in neat, crisp stacks. My cooking tools arranged by size. Someone had been inside my tent while I was out chasing the voice. Morning didn't help. If anything, it made things worse. New gear had appeared near the fire supplies that definitely hadn't been there the night before. A pristine tent still in the stuff sack. Multiple pairs of hiking boots lined up by size. Backpacks hanging from tree branches at identical heights. All of it spotless. All of it arranged with the same obsessive order. I waited all day for someone to return, but no one came. The huge fire burned continuously, yet I never saw a single person add wood. By sunset, the voice returned. "Help us, we're injured." Same exact voice as the night before. Not similar. Identical. Like a recording being played from inside the trees. I followed it again, desperate to believe there was someone human behind all this. But it only led me in circles. Up slopes where the sound came from high above, where no person could stand. Down to streams with no footprints, no movement. The voice always led nowhere. By the third day, I finally understood. That morning, scattered in the woods beyond the clearing, I found bones. Human bones. Arranged in the same perfect patterns as the camping gear. Skulls lined up like a display. Leg bones sorted by length, bleached clean, placed with care. The thing running this camp didn't want to save hikers. It collected them. I counted at least 40 skulls. 40 people who'd seen a beacon, believed they were rescued, and instead became part of whatever this thing was building. I backed away from the bone piles, shaking. I needed to leave. But when I reached my tent, my heart nearly stopped. All my gear, every piece of it, was gone from where I'd left it. Instead, it had been added to the displays. My sleeping bag lay perfectly aligned with the others. My tent hung from a branch. My cooking pot was stacked with dozens of identical ones. I was being cataloged. Filed. Prepared. That night, the voice changed. "Chris, we need your help." It knew my name. And now it didn't sound like that generic man anymore. It used my mother's voice. "Chris, honey, I'm hurt. Please help me." Then my sister. "Chris, where are you? I can't fly my way back." Then my friend Jake from work. "Hey man," twisted my ankle, "can you give me a hand?" It was using voices from my life, voices it shouldn't know. But each one was just a little wrong. My mom was too calm. My sister sounded weirdly formal. Jake never called me man. It had listened somehow, studied, practiced. That night, I didn't chase the voices. I sat by the fire, staring into it, finally understanding the trap. The fire was a lure. The perfect clearing, the perfect gear arrangements, the voices. It had been working this scheme for years. Every piece of equipment around me belonged to someone who never made it out. On the fourth night, the voices turned hostile. "Chris, get over here now." "Chris, we're dying. Why won't you help us?" It screamed from impossible angles. Once, I looked up a cliff face and heard my mother's voice coming from 30 feet above the ground, from empty air. Whatever this was, it wasn't human. It wasn't pretending well anymore, and it wasn't being patient. By the fifth day, I knew running was my only chance. I gathered whatever scraps of gear weren't part of the displays, some food, a water bottle, my compass. I realized something important. The thing liked order, needed order. Everything in perfect rows, perfect stacks. Maybe if I broke that order, it would distract it. Maybe it would slow it down. So I waited until the voices started again, calling my name, begging, threatening, shifting through the people I loved. Then I kicked apart the displays. I scattered bones, knocked over tents, threw equipment into the trees. I made the perfect clearing into chaos. The voices stopped instantly. The fire dimmed, shrinking. The silence was worse than the voices, but it was my chance. I ran. Following a stream downhill, I pushed through the freezing night. The voices returned eventually, but they were different now. Angrier, faster, closer. "Chris, come back. Chris, you can't leave. Chris, you belong here." They chased me for hours, slipping just behind the trees, but I didn't slow down. Dawn finally weakened them, their calls fading like smoke. I followed the stream for 2 more days, surviving on melted snow and a handful of energy bars, until a search and rescue helicopter finally spotted me. I was hypothermic, rambling about perfect fires and voice traps. They told me I'd been missing for 7 days. When I explained about the clearing, they searched the coordinates I gave but found nothing except an old burned-out patch of ground. No tents, no gear, no bones. The official report said hallucinations from exposure. that the mind invents things when it's dying. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. I know what called my name. I never hiked alone again. For years, I barely left Chicago. The chaotic noise of the kitchen feels safe now compared to the silence of those mountains. But sometimes, walking to my car at night, I hear a voice drifting from an empty alley calling, "Chris," and I run every time. If you ever see a perfect signal fire in the wilderness, one burning too steadily, too cleanly, don't follow it. Some fires aren't meant to save you. They're meant to collect you. My name is Alex Rodriguez, and I'm finally ready to tell the truth about what happened to me in Alaska years ago. Not the watered-down version I fed the FBI. Not the casual lie I offer anyone who asks about my scars. The truth. The version I've carried alone, buried under fear and silence. Because after everything I've uncovered since then, silence isn't an option anymore. Back then, I was months into unemployment after the warehouse in Denver closed overnight. My savings were gone. My landlord was threatening eviction. I was living on ramen twice a day just to stretch my food stamps. So when I stumbled across a job posting on a sketchy employment board I'd never even heard of, I grabbed at it like a drowning man grabs rope. Alaska Wilderness Experience. Paid training. 12,000 completion bonus. The website looked legitimate enough. Pictures of untouched forests, smiling participants in high-end outdoor gear, glowing testimonials. Even a Better Business Bureau badge. What sold me most was a video from a guy named Mike Torres from Dallas. He looked like me, young, broke, desperate for a break. He said the program changed his life, helped him become a full-time wilderness guide. I should have noticed his eyes never quite met the camera. I should have noticed his trembling hands. I should have noticed the video timestamp from 18 months ago, even though Mike looked like he'd aged 10 years since then. But desperation blinds you. You stop seeing warning signs. You start seeing lifelines. They bought my plane ticket to Fairbanks and arranged a pickup. The driver, Dave, looked exactly like someone named Dave should. Flannel shirt, weather-beaten hands, friendly attitude. He chatted about moose, bears, and northern lights as we drove deeper into the wilderness. 3 hours in, my phone signal died. The trees thickened. The world grew quiet. "You picked a good time," Dave said. Late October. Animals get interesting before winter. Base camp was smaller than I expected. 5 wooden buildings clustered around a central fire pit. A hand-painted sign said, "Alaska Adventure Experiences, Mile 63. Forest surrounded everything so densely it felt like the trees were listening. The other participants arrived around the fire that first night. Jenny from Ohio, laid off from a factory. Mark from California, just graduated with no prospects. Sarah from Georgia, a teacher craving adventure. David from Florida, recently divorced and restarting his life. 6 of us total, all broke, all grateful, all desperate enough to trust a miracle. The program coordinator was a man named Rick Patterson, mid-50s, built like someone carved from the outdoors. Pale blue eyes that looked through you, not at you. He explained the layout, 2 weeks of intense wilderness survival training. Every participant had to document their experience through daily video journals and written logs. "Your documentation helps us recruit the next group," Rick said with a pleasant smile. "We keep costs low by using your real experiences for marketing." He handed each of us a small video camera and a journal. "Document everything," he said, "especially how you feel." Training began before sunrise the next day. Rick and his 2 assistants, Carl and Jim, both silent men with quick, sharp eyes, taught shelter building, fire starting, water purification, navigation. But something felt off. They weren't teaching us to survive. They were teaching us to react to fear. "Talk about what scares you," Rick would say as we practiced. "Explain it to the camera. The more honest, the better." That night I recorded my first journal entry. "Day 1, I said, staring into the lens in my tiny cabin. "It's beautiful here, but the isolation is unsettling. We're miles from anything. No cell service, no internet. If something goes wrong, we're on our own." Rick reviewed our footage the next morning. He looked especially pleased with the parts where we talked about fear. On day 3, things started to fall apart. Mark didn't return from a shelter-building exercise. Rick organized a search party. But we found nothing. Over dinner, he shrugged it off. Some people panic, he said. Isolation can crack them. He probably headed for the main road. But Mark didn't take his wallet, or his return ticket, or any of his things. When I pointed that out, Rick simply said, "People abandon things when they panic." That night, I heard him. Mark. His voice drifting from deep in the forest, faint but unmistakable. "Help me, please. Someone help me." Jenny heard it too. So did Sarah. When we told Rick, he gave us a sympathetic look. "Sound travels strangely here," he said. "Atmospheric conditions can trap old sounds. You heard echoes. 2 more vanished over the next 4 days." Sarah disappeared during navigation practice. David didn't return from a water collection task. Their belongings remained untouched each time. And each night, we heard them calling from the forest, voices stretching thin with distance and fear. By day 7, only Jenny and I were left. That evening, Rick gathered us around the fire with a grin that made my stomach churn. "Congratulations," he announced. "You two passed Phase 1. He handed us envelopes. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. You'll each receive an additional $20,000. Jenny and I exchanged a look. That money could change our lives. "What's Phase 2? She asked. "The ultimate survival challenge," Rick said. "You'll be taken to a remote location with minimal supplies and left alone for 72 hours. Carl and Jim will monitor your progress. The footage is for our premium clients." Something inside me snapped. "What kind of clients?" I asked. "Wealthy outdoorsmen," Rick said. "People who crave authentic survival experiences through you." That night, I couldn't sleep. Something about all of it felt wrong beyond words. The money was real. The program was documented. Everything looked legitimate. But the disappearances? The voices? Rick's obsession with our fear? While Jenny slept, I slipped into Rick's office. His computer was locked, but his paperwork wasn't. What I found froze my blood. Medical files. Blood types. Allergies. Dental records. Dozens of people spanning 3 years. Each labeled with notes. Harvested over. Processed client. Successful hunt. At the bottom of every file were payment records. Huge sums wired in from numbered accounts. This wasn't training. It was a hunting operation. I grabbed as many files as possible and ran to wake Jenny. She read through them, her face draining of color. "We have to leave," she whispered. We tried, but Carl was already waiting outside. "Going somewhere?" Rick stepped out of the shadows. "We know what this is," I said, voice shaking. "You're hunting people." Rick sighed. "I hope to keep the illusion longer. It's more interesting when the prey doesn't know." Carl and Jim grabbed us. Rick led us to a hidden building behind the lodge. Inside was a basement, steel doors, concrete walls, a row of cells. The missing participants were there, some barely alive. "The hunt," Rick explained, "began in 12 hours. You'll each get water, a little food, maybe a knife. Survive 72 hours, and you live to be hunted again. Some survivors become staff." He smiled like a proud business owner. "We've been doing this 15 years. Started with local homeless people. But job seekers like you make far better sport. Resourceful, hopeful, desperate." The next 12 hours crept by like a nightmare. Survivors explained how clients hunted with bows, rifles, even handmade weapons. How they kept trophies, how hardly anyone survived. At dawn, they loaded us into a truck and drove deeper into the wilderness, a valley boxed in by mountains. They gave each of us a backpack. Water for 2 days, a few bars. A knife, a whistle. 72 hours, Rick said as SUVs pulled up behind him. Wealthy men in expensive gear got out, stretching, checking weapons. "This group looks promising," one said. "Young. Healthy. Should be good sport." They released us with a 10-minute head start. Most ran. I didn't. I hid. And when the youngest client separated from the group, tracking Sarah through the mud, I struck from behind. The knife went into his back before he could scream. I took his rifle, ammo, radio, and GPS. For the first time, I felt like I had a chance. Using the GPS, I hunted the hunters. I killed 2 more, turning their tactics back on them. By the second night, panic spread through their group. They weren't used to being prey. On the third morning, I found Jenny in a cave. Exhausted, frightened, alive. Together, we used the stolen radio to call for help. The Alaska State Troopers arrived hours later. What they found made national news for weeks. The holding cells, the hunting gear, the bodies scattered across the valley. Rick and his assistants fled but were caught within 24 hours. Financial records linked them to wealthy clients across the country. The trial lasted 9 months. Dozens of victims identified, many never found. Rick got life without parole, his assistants too. Some clients testified for reduced sentences, revealing a net worth that stretched across Alaska, Montana, and Canada. But what the news never revealed, what I couldn't tell the FBI, is that Rick wasn't a lone monster. He was part of an industry, a franchise. Other operations existed, other camps, other traps disguised as job opportunities, using the same ads, the same videos, the same recruitment strategies. Over the next 3 years, I traced over 50 similar operations across North America, some still running, some protected by money, influence, silence. And somewhere along the way, I became something I never expected, a hunter hunting hunters. Rick taught me that fear sharpens instincts. Survival forces adaptation. I've used every skill he drilled into me to track down the people who pay to kill the desperate. Some authorities listen, some don't. And sometimes, I take matters into my own hands. If you're reading this, and you've ever been desperate enough to consider a wilderness job that seems too perfect, don't. They know exactly how to target people like us. And if you're someone wealthy enough to pay for the ultimate hunt, understand one thing. I know who you are. I know what you've done. And I'm very, very good at what Rick taught me. The hunt never ended. It just changed direction. My name is Tyler Morrison, and I need to tell someone what really happened in Alaska before I lose my nerve. This isn't some campfire story. This is my official statement to document what the authorities refuse to acknowledge. I was working as a diesel mechanic at Morrison & Sons Garage in Detroit. Yeah, same last name. My old man started the place years ago, and I was supposed to take over someday. I had this thing about fixing broken engines that nobody else could figure out. Give me a blown transmission or a seized motor, and I'd work on it like solving a puzzle until my hands were black and my back was screaming. My dad always said I had the touch. I could diagnose problems just by listening to how an engine breathed. Machines weren't my only addiction. I started gambling when I turned 18. Just scratchers and Lions games at first. Then I discovered online poker, and that's when everything went sideways. I had the same obsessive personality that made me good with engines, but with cards, it was poison. I'd stay up until 3 in the morning chasing losses, telling myself the next hand would fix everything. By February, I owed Marco Torino 20 grand. Marco ran a book out of a pizza place on 8 Mile, and he wasn't patient about collections. After he sent Vince and Tommy to talk to me, I was left with 2 cracked ribs and a clear message. I knew I had maybe a week before they came back with more than words. I liquidated everything, sold my tools, cashed my last paycheck, even pawned my dad's watch, and bought a one-way ticket to Fairbanks. I told everyone I was taking a mental health break. Alaska seemed far enough from Detroit that Marco's reach wouldn't extend there. At REI in Fairbanks, this clerk named Danny helped me pick out camping gear. When I explained I wanted true isolation, somewhere nobody would accidentally stumble across my camp, his face went weird. "You sure about that?" he asked, fidgeting with his name tag. "There's places up here that, well, people go missing." "Perfect," I said. "That's exactly what I need." Danny drew me a map to something called Hunger Creek Valley, about 50 miles northeast. He said, "You'd need to hike 20 miles from the end of a logging road to reach the entrance." "Why is it called Hunger Creek?" I asked. Danny wouldn't meet my eyes. "Old prospector named it back in the 1920s, he said. Place made him hungry. Hungry in ways that weren't natural. The hike nearly killed me. I'm strong from years of wrestling transmissions, but hiking with a full pack through dense forest pushed me to my limits. I took 2 days camping once along the trail. By the time I reached the valley entrance, I was exhausted, dehydrated, and questioning all my life choices. The valley was beautiful in that untouched way Alaska specializes in, maybe 3 miles long, half a mile wide, steep walls covered in massive spruces. A clear stream ran down the center, and the silence was absolute. No bird sounds, no insect buzz, nothing. But there was this smell, sweet and rotten, like meat left in the sun. It was strongest near the entrance. I followed the creek deeper until the air cleared and made camp near a bend about a mile from the entrance. Fresh water, level ground, good sightlines. Perfect spot. That first night I heard sounds from up on the ridge walls. Not animal sounds, but human sounds trying to be animal sounds, like someone imitating wolf howls, but getting the rhythm wrong. They came from different directions, sometimes overlapping, like multiple people were coordinating. I told myself it was stress, exhaustion, maybe some kind of echo effect. I kept my camp hatchet close. The next morning, I decided to explore and maybe catch some trout for breakfast. That's when I found the bones. They were everywhere around my campsite, partially hidden under forest debris, human bones, completely clean, arranged in deliberate patterns. Skulls stacked like pyramids, long bones sorted by size and bundled with what looked like sinew. Ribs laid out in perfect geometric patterns. I've gutted plenty of deer with my dad, so I know bones. But this was different. These weren't scattered by scavengers. They'd been placed with surgical precision, and there were too many. Based on the skull count, maybe 50 different people. Every bone had teeth marks, not from bears or wolves. These were precise, methodical gnaw marks, like something had carefully stripped every scrap of meat. My hands were shaking as I examined the arrangements. Some bones looked decades old, bleached white by weather. Others were newer, still stained with what might have been blood. I even found a Casio watch still running, tangled in a rib cage. The date read March 14th, just 2 weeks ago. That night, the sounds got closer. I could see reflections in my firelight. Eyes too high off the ground, like whatever was watching stood 7 feet tall. I grabbed my flashlight and swept the tree line. That's when it stepped into the light. It had been human once. The basic framework was there. Bipedal, 2 arms, 1 head. But everything was wrong. Stretched. Arms hanging past its knees. Fingers elongated like spider legs. Skin gray and loose, hanging in folds like an empty suit. But the worst part was its face. Still recognizably human, but hollowed out. Cheeks sunken so deep the bones showed. Eyes were black holes. Its mouth opened, revealing broken human teeth mixed with rings and earrings threaded on its tongue like trophies. It studied me for 10 minutes without moving. Then it spoke in a woman's voice. So hungry. So very hungry. It walked around my camp in a perfect circle, never breaking eye contact. Every few steps, it would stop, sniff the air with nostrils too wide, and run that jewelry-laden tongue across its lips. I sat by my fire all night with the hatchet in my lap, watching it circle me like a shark. When dawn broke, it melted back into the forest without a sound. On the 3rd day, I tried to leave, but when I reached the valley entrance, my exit was blocked by a wall of human remains. Fresh corpses mixed with older skeletons stacked 10 feet high, cemented together with dry blood and sinew. The smell was indescribable. I could see camping gear mixed in with the carnage. Backpacks, sleeping bags, hiking boots. This thing had been collecting people for years, maybe decades, using their remains to seal the valley. I was trapped. As I explored deeper, I found more evidence. Bone monuments scattered throughout the forest, each one a gruesome work of art carved into tree trunks. Messages in what looked like fingernails: feed the hunger and become one with the valley. On the 4th day, it started using voices. "Help me," it called from the forest in a child's voice. "I'm scared and I can't find my mommy." Then an old man's voice. "Please, I think I'm having a heart attack." A woman sobbing. Each voice perfect, complete with regional accents and emotional inflection. This thing wasn't just collecting bodies, it was harvesting personalities, storing the essence of everyone it consumed. It would use the voices to lure me away from my camp. I'd see someone in distress, and every human instinct screamed at me to help. But through my binoculars, I could see it hiding behind the trees, waiting. By the 5th day, I was desperate. I woke to find all my food missing. In its place, neat arrangements of finger bones positioned like an offering. The creature was starving me out, following me everywhere, just close enough to stay visible, like a predator waiting for its prey to weaken. On day 6, I found fresh kills. A family of hikers' parents and 2 kids, arranged in a circle, holding hands. Dead maybe 6 hours, partially consumed, but positioned with almost loving care. That's when I realized the truth. This thing wasn't just a predator. It was lonely. It had been alone in this valley for God knows how long, collecting people, not just for food but for company. The voices, the careful arrangements, the way it studied me. It was trying to understand human connection, the only way it knew. On day 7, I collapsed while trying to fish. Hunger and exhaustion caught up with me. The creature was on me instantly, those spider-like fingers reaching for my throat. But instead of tearing me apart, it hesitated, tilted its head like it was confused. "You smell different," it said in my voice. Somehow, it had learned to mimic me. "You smell like machines, oil, metal." I managed to roll away, grab my hatchet, but instead of attacking, I did something that surprised both of us. I started talking. "You're broken," I said, gasping, like an engine that's been running wrong for too long. "All this hunger, this collecting, it's not fixing the real problem." The thing stopped circling me. For the first time, it looked genuinely curious. "I fix things for a living," I continued, slowly getting to my feet. "Machines mostly, but I can see what's wrong with you. You're not hungry for food. You're hungry for connection, for what you used to be." It made a sound like wind through broken glass. When it spoke again, the voice was different, older, sadder. "I was David. David Chen came here in 1928 to prospect for gold. Got lost in a snowstorm. Started eating." It touched its face with those horrible fingers. "Things I shouldn't have eaten. Things that made me change." The story came out in fragments. David Chen, a prospector trapped in the valley during an early blizzard, had found the remains of previous victims, gold miners from the 1890s who had resorted to cannibalism before dying. Desperate and starving, David had eaten the contaminated flesh. But something in the valley, some mineral in the water or spore in the air, had transformed him into something that could never stop being hungry. For decades, he had been trapped, watching his humanity slip away piece by piece. The voices weren't just mimicry, he whispered. They were the last echoes of my victim's consciousness, stored in whatever I became. I tried to stop, but the hunger never stops. And I'm so lonely, so very, very lonely. I made a decision that probably saved my life. Instead of trying to fight or run, I sat down across from him. "Tell me about before," I said. "Tell me about David Chen." For the next hour, I listened to the story of a man who lost everything to an addiction, not gambling like me, but an addiction to human flesh that had literally transformed him into a monster. We were both broken machines in our own way. When he finished, I stood slowly, walked to my pack, and pulled out my emergency flare gun, the one piece of gear I had been saving for absolute desperation. "David," I said, "I can't fix what you've become, but I can fix the loneliness." I aimed the flare gun at the wall of bodies blocking the valley entrance and fired. The red phosphorus ignited the dried meat and bone like a funeral pyre. David made a sound like crying. "The others," he said. "They'll be free now. Their voices." I helped him gather the bone monuments throughout the valley. We burned them all, sending decades of victims to whatever peace they could find. When the last fire died, David looked more human than he had since I'd arrived. Still wrong, still twisted, but somehow more himself. "Go," he said. "Before the hunger comes back, before I can't let you leave." I packed my gear and walked toward the now clear valley entrance. At the threshold, I looked back. "David, what will you do now?" He was already fading into the forest. "Learn to starve with dignity," he said. "It's the last human thing I can do." I hiked out and made it to the logging road where a Forest Service truck picked me up. I told them I got lost and ran out of supplies. They bought the story. I reported David's location to the authorities, but when the search team went out, they found nothing. No valley, no bones, no evidence. The GPS coordinates I gave them led to a solid wall of granite. But I know what I saw. Months later, I got a package with no return address. Inside was a small bone carving, a perfect miniature of a transmission gear, the kind I work on every day, carved with fingernails into what looked like a fragment of human skull. On the back, scratched in tiny letters, "Thank you for seeing, David. I've been clean from gambling ever since. I still work on engines, still solve problems other mechanics can't figure out. But now I know some things can't be fixed. Some hungers can't be fed. And sometimes, the most human thing you can do is choose to starve rather than feed the beast inside you." The authorities can deny it all they want. But somewhere in Alaska, there's a valley where a man named David Chen is learning to die human. Every day he resists. The hunger is a small victory over the monster he became. That package proved he's still fighting, still remembering what it means to be David instead of just the thing that ate him. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's all any of us can hope for when faced with our own particular hungers.